It's Halloween night in Chicago. The stores along Main Avenue are leaving out bowls of candy for the evening's trick-or-treaters. Streets are closed off for the big parade downtown, and young children are running home from school to jump into their favorite costumes. It's a night of harmless, spooky fun for most, but not everyone. A police cruiser pulled up outside of an apartment building on Kenmore Avenue, overlooking the Graceland Cemetery. A pair of seasoned officers climbed out and made their way up to the 13th floor. There had been multiple reports of terrified screaming echoing through the building throughout the night. Was someone getting a little too into the Halloween spirit and watching a horror movie at ear-splitting volume? Or was this something altogether more sinister? The police officers approached the door of apartment 1330B and rapped on the hardwood. "Ma'am, is everything okay in there?" No reply. They repeated themselves, a little louder this time. They could hear movement from within, but still no answer came. That was enough probable cause for them to kick in the front door. The officers swept the apartment, going from room to room, hands hovering over their holsters. Kitchen, nothing. Bedroom, nothing. But the living room was a whole different horror story. To their utter disbelief, a human skeleton was standing in front of them, holding a swath of flayed human skin, still dripping with fresh blood. The skeleton was forcing one of its legs into the bloody sack, as though it was slipping on a Halloween costume. On the floor nearby, a pile of human bones sat atop mangled flesh. The officers gasped at the sight, and the skeleton turned to face them. Without hesitation, it dropped the flayed skin and lunged, wrapping its icy fingers around their throats. The rest was a cacophony of screams and gunshots, which soon gurgled and choked into a terrible silence. An hour later, a team of forensic specialists cordoned off the area while another officer photographed the crime scene. A pair of detectives paced around the apartment, trying to piece together what happened. A pair of armed, well-trained officers strangled with such force that their necks snapped, and across from them was a pile of bloody bones, meat, and human skin. Before the detectives had time to draw any conclusions, a group of black-suited FBI agents arrived and ordered the local cops to vacate the area. They were taking over the investigation now. Don't worry, these weren't agents from the Unusual Incidents Unit here to bungle this case further. They were SCP Foundation field agents, undercover, and actively searching for a certain ornery bag of bones, SCP-3114, a skeleton that the adjectives spooky and scary don't even begin to cover. But first, a question. Wouldn't it be chilly to have no skin on? It's an old nursery rhyme that you might have heard during your childhood. And if you ask our professional opinion here at SCP Explained, we'd say yes, it would be. And SCP-3114 can confirm this from first-hand experience. That's why if ever you run into it, it may leave the encounter wearing your skin. That's right. SCP-3114 is a skeleton so desperate to be just like us, it's willing to skin any human it meets and wear our bloody pelts like a Halloween costume. This probably leaves you with a very understandable question. So, what's his whole deal? And thankfully, we have at least some of the answers to that. After conducting a series of cognitive tests on the anomaly, Foundation researchers concluded that SCP-3114 responds primarily to visual stimuli, with its other senses ranging from muted to non-existent. If something even vaguely humanoid enters its line of sight, 3114 will enter its rage state, making a beeline for the victim and strangling them to death. Researchers believe 3114 chooses strangulation as its favorite murder method because it leaves the skin intact, aside from a few minor bruises and abrasions. And once the victim is dead, it will begin meticulously cutting them open and removing their bones, again trying its best to do as little damage to the skin as possible. SCP-3114 will then attempt to wear the skin as its own, eventually discarding it after wear and tear sets in. In one interaction, subject D-1724, an adult male, entered SCP-3114's containment chamber. SCP-3114 attacked him, reacting with an increased level of aggression when the man tried to fight back. SCP-3114 damaged the body of D-1724 to the point that halfway through removing his bones, it decided that even the skin was beyond salvaging. It discarded the body in the corner of its enclosure, placing sticks and boxes over it, in what researchers believe to be a form of pseudo-burial. Tests on SCP-3114's physical makeup indicate that it is stronger and more resilient than a normal human skeleton, owing to it being made from a far denser material than non-anomalous human bones. During tests, researchers attacked the bones with sledgehammers, power tools, and other means of exterior impact, concluding that it took up to 3 times more force to break one of the anomaly's bones than those of a normal person. SCP-3114 also has regenerative healing properties, being able to mend broken bones at shocking speeds, making the creature effectively immortal. Even though SCP-3114 has no musculature or connective tissue of any kind, its skeleton is still somehow to support itself and move independently. When a bone is removed or pulled away from its place, it will quickly return to its original position once a force is no longer acting on it. It also has far greater speed and strength than your average non-anomalous human, despite its lack of muscles. SCP-3114 also seems to have some semblance of intelligence. As an extension of its drive to appear more human, it even has periods of dormancy, where it mimics human sleep. Researchers have placed multiple items in SCP-3114's enclosure to observe how it reacts. These items have included sticks, boxes, tires, and building blocks. A few experiments even involved placing live subjects into its enclosure, often with predictably violent results. Due to the danger of being in proximity of SCP-3114, Foundation researchers use projections of humans to lure it into a smaller secondary containment cell adjacent to its primary enclosure. Foundation staff are barred from entry until SCP-3114 has been locked in this secondary cell. Only then can items be added or removed from its habitat. Mess this up, and you're all but guaranteed a closed casket funeral. Something this strong and aggressive can create considerable containment challenges for the Foundation, so they started exploring a new question. What can pacify this walking skeleton's homicidal wrath? 2 things, as it turns out. The first is finding a skin that fits just right. Researchers placed a freshly deceased male cadaver into SCP-3114's enclosure. Naturally, SCP-3114 began to systematically remove the bones of the cadaver one by one, then place the skin of the corpse over its own skeletal frame. SCP-3114 seemed happy with its new skin, observing itself in a mirror. SCP-3114 studied the reflection from different angles, attempting to smile with its sagging face and mimicking hand gestures one might see in common social situations. Intrigued by this development, researchers sent D-4843 into the chamber to interact directly with SCP-3114. Upon coming face-to-face with SCP-3114 wearing decaying human skin, the human subject became terrified and attempted to leave the enclosure. SCP-3114 persisted in trying to interact with the D-Class, attempting a handshake and even caressing D-4843's face, its stolen skin sculpted into an unflinching smile. The D-Class was not charmed by this. Instead, he wet himself and was allowed to leave the enclosure to change his underwear. SCP-3114 seemed confused by the subject's fear and subsequent departure, waiting by the door for him to come back. It then grew frustrated and looked at itself in the mirror again, this time reacting angrily and violently tearing off its skin, perhaps made self-conscious by the D-Class's reaction to its new face. From that encounter, researchers concluded that SCP-3114 would not immediately attack if it was wearing a skin that it deemed suitable. The second thing that calms this bag of bones is the companionship of man's best friend. That's right, SCP-3114 has a proclivity towards dogs. This was discovered in a series of experiments where the Foundation cross-tested the anomaly with a variety of animal specimens. The first of these animals was a gorilla. SCP-3114 appeared to exhibit some hesitation at first, indicating a level of recognition between humans and our not-so-distant evolutionary cousins. But unfortunately, the confrontation ended violently when the gorilla became agitated and tried to exert its dominance over SCP-3114. This led to a physical altercation where the gorilla was overpowered and killed, though not without breaking one of SCP-3114's ribs first. Thankfully, the second attempt at animal interaction, this time with a border collie, went much smoother. SCP-3114 took care to be gentle when playing with and petting the dog, and even when the dog attempted to bite one of its leg bones, SCP-3114 did not react in an exponentially violent manner. The pair spent the better part of 2 hours playing together, playing fetch and seeming to enjoy each other's company. It's comforting to know that there are at least some things capable of temporarily taming this stack of murderous calcium. But what happens when it breaches containment? This brings us back to our Halloween crime scene. An embedded field agent in the FBI introduced himself as Special Agent Thomas Seward. He spoke to the local detectives on the scene, showing them a badge they didn't recognize, and asking them to come downstairs to a mobile office outside the building, where they would be debriefed. Members of Mobile Task Force Gamma 5, also known as the Red Herrings, were waiting in this unit to administer amnestics to any members of local law enforcement who knew about the case. They would later also canvass the building for other witnesses and make arrangements to ensure that the body cam footage of the 2 fallen officers would be destroyed. It was also unclear exactly how SCP-3114 escaped containment, but recapturing the subject for the safety of the local population remained of paramount importance. With this goal in mind, Agent Seward mobilized MTF Pi-1, also known as the City Slickers, a mobile task force that specializes in the investigation, containment, and subsequent cleanup of anomalies in densely populated urban environments. Under the guise of the FBI, the Pi-1 members spread across the streets of Chicago in black vehicles, monitoring police scanners for reports or sightings of walking skeletons attacking the civilian population. Meanwhile, several blocks away, SCP-3114 found itself walking past a row of clothing stores. It stopped at the sight of a mannequin modeling sportswear in a window display. Instead of charging at the humanoid figure with lethal intent, SCP-3114 calmly walked into the store and approached the mannequin. It began to study the figure, taking off its clothes and trying them on piece by piece. When it was fully clothed, it assumed the mannequin's pose. It then began to observe itself in a nearby mirror with rapt fascination. A store clerk emerged from the back room, noticing that someone was trying on clothes outside of the changing room. He walked over to offer assistance, but was stopped in his tracks at the sight of this strange new customer and the turn of his bleached white skull. Not long after that, the anomaly left the store, wearing the clerk's skin. As it emerged onto the streets unnoticed amidst the throng of trick-or-treaters, SCP-3114 took in its surroundings. What a strange new world it found itself in. Then it spotted a nearby group of trick-or-treaters wearing various costumes, most notably a plastic skull mask. SCP-3114 had found its people. Excited by the prospect of another walking skeleton, SCP-3114 decided to follow the group as they sauntered over to a larger crowd, gathering on the main avenue for the annual Halloween parade. Among the many participants dressed as werewolves and vampires and other classic Halloween creatures, SCP-3114 noticed a group of paraders dressed as skeletons, dancing and walking together. People were cheering them on, taking photos and smiling at the spectacle. Perhaps it wasn't so bad to be a bone man after all. And everyone else at the parade had their eyes on SCP-3114. They didn't see it as a violent, anomalous skeleton wearing skin stolen from an innocent store clerk. They saw it as one of the most brilliantly realistic costumes the parade had ever seen. People stared and waved and smiled in awe, and SCP-3114 was loving every bit of attention. Soon enough, SCP-3114 was leading the parade, waving gleefully at the crowds of impressed trick-or-treaters. It walked with the others for several blocks, occasionally picking up fallen candy to throw at the crowd.
Wow, great costume. That looks super real, mister,
called a nearby 8-year-old, marveling up at SCP-3114.
Do you want to come trick-or-treating with us?
He motioned to a group of 3 costume friends. They were all dressed as members of the Avengers. SCP-3114 turned its bony head, draped in its stolen skin, and followed the eager kids as they began walking from house to house asking for Halloween treats. Watching the children stick out their bags and plastic pumpkins asking for candy, SCP-3114 began mimicking the behavior. It even picked up and started to carry its own plastic pumpkin. Meanwhile, across town, Agent Thomas Seward was notified about a pile of bloody bones found behind the counter in an upmarket clothing store. Only one creature in town tonight could be behind that: SCP-3114. Seward made a call to all available Gamma 5 members, requesting a cleanup on site and comprehensive amnestic treatment for all witnesses at the crime scene. Seward and his team hit the bricks, searching the surrounding area. He noticed the large crowds leaving the parade, with some adolescents marveling at the amazing costume the zombie-looking guy was wearing. And at that moment, it all came together for Agent Seward. What better place for a monster wearing human skin to hide than in plain sight on Halloween? He mused to himself while unclipping his radio from his jacket. Seward ordered all available agents to converge on the main avenue and search any trick-or-treaters wearing any costume that looked like rotting human skin. They were on the clock. If they didn't get to SCP-3114 before its current skin suit degraded fully, it would claim another life tonight. Meanwhile, SCP-3114 itself continued its night out in public, trick-or-treating with a group of children who were blissfully unaware of how much danger they were in. As they went home to home, the creature's costume started to take on a pallid green complexion as the rot set in. It gave off the most repulsive smell. At some point, flies even began to gather around it. To any ignorant passerby, it was still the most horrifying and brilliant costume they'd ever seen, and whoever was wearing it must have been so committed to the character because they never said a word. As the night wore on, the children each got calls from their mothers telling them it was time to come home. After all the obligatory grumbles, they gave in and did so, wishing their strange, silent friend in the horrifying zombie costume a happy Halloween. This left SCP-3114 adrift, wandering around, not sure exactly what to do with itself. Perhaps it was time to find a new skin. Maybe then people would want to hang out with it again. The anomaly was distracted from its dangerous thoughts by a dog barking on a nearby lawn. SCP-3114 was delighted to find another four-legged friend out here in the wild, and approached to pet the tiny creature as it wagged its little tail. How nice it felt to finally have a familiar comfort again. That's when it noticed one more little boy wandering the lonely streets. A new friend, perhaps? SCP-3114 would follow him and see. Just a few blocks down, SCP agents scoured the streets with flashlights asking anyone they could if they'd seen someone wearing an eerily realistic costume, with little in the way of success. Agent Seward was in the middle of questioning a man who had participated in the parade earlier that night when he got a phone call from one of his subordinates. Listening to police scanners, agents had intercepted a call coming from a terrified mother who claimed that a grown man in a strange costume had followed her little boy home. The agents immediately made their way to the address, making sure local police were notified not to respond to the call. Upon arrival, they found that SCP-3114 had broken into the family's living room and was petting the family's dog. The skin suit had almost fully degraded now, hanging off the monster's body like rotten bologna. They didn't have much time. Agent Seward had his men surround the building as a containment vehicle backed up towards the home. They couldn't engage SCP-3114 directly without the risk of a fatality. That's why they'd fitted the inside of the vehicle with a projector, just like the one inside SCP-3114's cell, to lure it back into the trap. Soon enough, just as Seward and all the others had predicted, SCP-3114 began to angrily tear off the rotten skin of the unfortunate store clerk. Its bones shone in the moonlight once more, stained with blood. The next person it saw would be dead. So it was extremely lucky that the next person it saw was the hologram of a male D-Class standing deep in the back of the containment vehicle's portable cell. SCP-3114 sped towards the hologram, grasping claws outstretched, so intent on getting its new skin that it didn't even notice the bulkhead closing behind it. Agent Seward breathed a sigh of relief as the vehicle drove off to the nearest containment site. But for him and the rest of his men, the night had just begun. They still had a hell of a mess to clean up, and all this just so that murderous skeleton could have a happy Halloween. Now go check out SCP-060 Infernal Occult Skeleton and SCP-1123 Atrocity Skull for more nightmarish anomalous bones.